Hello, this is Mark Holmes, the Senior Editorial Director of Viasat, and we're back with another of our great Thursday morning conversations. And I'm delighted to have with me today one of the most well-known figures in our industry, Mark Dankberg, the CEO of Viasat. Mark, how are you doing today?
So far, so good. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we're delighted to have you on, and we start these conversations now with some fun, different types of questions. So before we talk about Viasat, I have 5 questions for you. So the first question is this: you are going to go on a ride to space with 4 other people. It can be celebs or people you know. Who would you choose to go on a ride to space with? And one of the 4 has to be from the space industry.
Okay, well, I thought about that. I've got a trick answer. One is I think I'd go with my immediate family, wife and kids. The big thing is they would let me drive, so that's so I like to drive. That's one, and then the other is just to be sure. My son, actually, all my kids at some point worked in the space industry, and my son still does, so they qualify.
Fantastic. Is it something you ever thought about? Is that something, someone, is that ever cropped up in a conversation at all?
No, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of, no, not really. I mean, there's different directions you could go, uh, but I like that one. I mean, I think we partly, I was just thinking about all the camping trips and stuff we used to do as a group. So that, going to space would be, that'd be a good adventure. So that made me think of that.
Fantastic. A Dankberg family trip to space. On the second question, the person you most admire in the space industry and why?
Yeah, thought about that one. It's a good question. I think I'd go with John F. Kennedy, mostly because, I mean, primarily because of, his ability to inspire the country for a whole generation really around going to the moon. Space travel is pretty amazing accomplishment. And then the other big thing is he delivered had that speech at Rice University, that's where I went. So it's kind of a memorable side note to that.
No, super interesting. The third question is the favorite city you visited on business.
Uh, so I'm gonna extend it to a region a little bit, which would be the Florida Space Coast. So one is that's obviously Cape Canaveral Kennedy Space Center. So that's one of the most exciting places you can go on business. And then if you figure the sort of the greater region, if you're going to go there, you're going to fly into Orlando. That's where Disney World is. So that's a big attraction too. So you get to roll both extremes into one.
No, good choice. I think this is a great question for you. One prediction of how AI will change our lives over the next 5 years.
Yeah, one area actually, my engineering degree is in biomedical engineering, and I think that the applications of AI to healthcare and medicine, especially things like well, certainly for diagnosis and imagery reading and correlation, but also for drug discovery, synthetic biology. I think it's going to could have a big impact if used well.
Okay, no, that's super interesting. And final one of the opening questions, what would you say is your most treasured possession?
Oh, yeah, I thought about that one. So back in COVID, when we couldn't do anything, I got this non-impact running machine that I could use in my house. And that has been kind of a lifesaver for me. I've got thousands and thousands of miles on that. It helps me keep my sanity and it's a good distraction, from work. I really enjoy doing that. Yeah, and they don't make them anymore. So I'm a little. When I worry about, I don't worry that much about material possessions, but I don't know what I'm going to do if that thing ever fails on me.
Fingers crossed. So the second part is that let's talk a little bit about sort of Viasat at the moment, and I'm sort of curious because we're talking right in the time when you're in between launch of like Viasat 3 satellites. Tell us a little bit about the importance of these satellites and what they're going to enable you and the company to do.
Okay, so they are really important. I mean, one is just think of them as a huge source of bandwidth, right? So we're in the business of providing bandwidth to our customers, and because of the anomaly we had with the first of those satellites, it's been a while since we've had more bandwidth. So this is really going to have a big impact on our ability to grow and the services that we can deliver in all of the Americas with this next one, and then Asia Pacific, and with the one following that. So that's really important. The other thing that's really unique about those satellites is their beamforming capability. Beamforming basically means the ability to put spot beams just where there's demand, just in time, and just the right amount. And that's going to have a really big impact. One of the things that is pretty interesting is if you look at demand over the world, if you just look at a heat map of demand, it is very, very concentrated. Probably over 80% of all the bandwidth in the world is consumed in 15 to 20% of the Earth's surface. So having satellites that have a large field of view, like a third of the world, but have the ability to just put bandwidth where it's needed, when it's needed, that's a really, really valuable feature. It also is if you look at part of what's going on now geopolitically around the world, the ability to withstand intentional interference or to be resilient to electronic interference, those things are really valuable. The same capabilities that let us put bandwidth where we want make it really resilient to interference. And I think that's going to be an increasingly important aspect as well. Some of these beamforming things, you can do them at any orbit, but you need some distance from Earth in order to be able to get that field of view and get the economic advantages that type of capability will provide. So I think it'll be a really good existence proof.
I mean, two follow-ups. I mean, this is a conversation obviously we have a lot about the future of GEO at the moment, and obviously with more constellations being announced this year as well. What's your sort of take? How do you see the future, not almost beyond these satellites and the future, because there obviously are less orders now for GEO satellites. That's clear. Is the glass half full or half empty now as far as GEO is concerned?
So think, kind of what we think about is, don't start with what orbit are you going to occupy. Start with what effects are you trying to create on the ground for your customers. And the main effects that people want is they want a lot of bandwidth and they want it at a low unit cost. That's basically why we Viasat got into the broadband business in the first place, is that we felt that we could reduce unit cost of bandwidth. Remember, the big transition has been broadcast to unicast. In the broadcast space, bandwidth was cost effective because you had a very large audience. The bandwidth, think of the bandwidth cost as the numerator, the number of people that received it as the denominator. So you could make bandwidth look really cost effective just by having a very large audience. But when it's unicast, it's an audience of one. So now the spotlight's really on what that cost of bandwidth is. So so the things that you'd want, that we're really focused on was cost of bandwidth. I think LEO introduced a component of latency, which is valuable. But boy, we've been in the broadband business for about 20 years. And think of it as streaming entertainment is 85% of the content. So once you get a stream started, latency doesn't matter anymore. So basically what I would say is, if you can make bandwidth from GEO at lower unit cost than you can from another orbit, all things considered, that includes geographic density, distribution, demand, then of course it's going to be really valuable. If you can't, well, then why would you do it, right? So that's the thing that we're focused on, is really low unit cost. I think that's going to come from a couple things. One is this ability to steer it to exactly the places where there is demand. The other one would be that you can just reduce the cost of geo platforms. So I'll tell you, one of the things that we did with Viasat 3, at the time, we needed a large platform to do the beamforming the way we did. We have a very powerful, flexible, software-defined beamforming system with all the software being on the ground, not in space. So that made it really effective. Now the opportunity is to use much smaller, cheaper platforms, be able to launch multiple satellites at a time, still get the advantages of the beamforming. What we think is, I think if we can make unicast bandwidth at a lower unit cost than any other way, I think the future of GEO is good. If you can't, then it won't be. What we're thinking right now is that we can.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What are you thinking right now? Because obviously, the Viasat 3 have been long talked about. So what?
Yeah.
And obviously the world has changed significantly since you announced them. So what is the thinking now going forward?
Well, I think so. Here's one of the ways to look at it. Is if you look at some of the things that have been done with LEO, one is people like really small antennas. That they should. That's a good thing. But the thing that enables real small antennas is power flux density on the ground. Right? If you can get high power flux density on the ground, and you can get the spatial separation that you need with small antennas, you can do that. So think of power flux density on the ground really doesn't depend at broadband frequencies, Ka band or higher, Ku band, pretty much at what altitude you're starting. So you just have to figure out how you make small beams, how you concentrate it. So think of, we can do small beams, you can do the same speeds, small antennas, you can do the same speeds into small antennas. So the big question is, can you reproduce the same effects from GEO as you can with LEO? And we think the answer is yes, you can do all those same things. What we think is we can do them at lower cost. And then you would add a LEO layer for low latency. And so right now, what we're focused on is we think the potential from GEO for lower cost bandwidth and higher speeds is high. And then we're basically going to be a buyer of LEO bandwidth. So we're doing that already with OneWeb. We're doing it with pretty much all the LEO operators, I'd say, and we'll expect to continue to do that in the future. The other really important thing about GEO compared to LEO is, GEO is regional. So I know one of the things that is one of the biggest issues in satellite right now is the role of sovereign systems. Think of sovereign systems from a national security perspective, especially where countries don't want to depend on foreign systems or even other countries or other enterprises for their national security. So if let's say you're a country, let's say you're Europe, roughly 1% of the surface of the Earth. If you depend on a LEO national security system, that every one of those satellites is going to spend 99% of its time someplace other than your area where you need it. So with a GEO system, GEOs are inherently, by definition, regional. So if you can reproduce the same effects regionally with 1, 2 satellites, as opposed to having to have hundreds or thousands of satellites to produce those effects in your own region to protect your borders, I think people are going to find that compelling. The big thing is you have to be able to reproduce those effects. The other thing that you probably want to do is add, what people are calling resiliency. And again, think of it, one of the reasons that LEOs are attractive and use small terminals is they're close to the Earth, so you can use low power to get there. But that also means you don't need very much power to jam them, as an example. So if you have a satellite at a GEO altitude, the Size and complexity of a jammer is a lot higher. Size and complexity of kinetic attacks is harder. So I think that there's still a lot to be determined on these issues of sovereignty from space.
Okay, so just one final question on that. So going forward, we can still expect some big geo announcements from Viasat, basically.
I would say you can expect some little geo announcements.
Okay.
Yeah, I do agree that you're not going to see the types of we wouldn't want to do a multi-$100 million geo satellite again. That takes several years to build. That part is not good. The long lead time, exquisite deployable antennas, that stuff's not good. But if you look at, we're also working on LEO systems, for instance, at mobile satellite services bands. So taking some of the same techniques that you'd use for those, putting those types of platforms at GEO, now you've got a lot of really interesting things to work with. You've got surface area for very advanced apertures. You've got significant amounts of power compared to what GEOs used to be. There's a lot of opportunity in those types of platforms. Think of them as platforms fairly similar to what people are using, maybe even smaller than what people are using at lower altitudes, but just put them at higher altitudes and take advantage of that field of view.
So could we see some big announcements this year, or is it still a little bit little announcements? Could we see announcements this year, or is it still a little bit further out, considering you've got these launches?
Not sure. Not sure. We'll do them when we're ready. But we've got some really interesting new technology. I think that is gonna be eye-opening. But think of it as all aimed at the same effects I described, which is how do I get really high speeds, really low airtime costs. That would be low cost. Think of it as cost per megabit per second, or gigabit per second, or gigabyte, or terabyte. Low costs and small terminals. Those are the things that we're really focused on from whatever altitudes we're going to work at, and whatever the demand requirements are. That's what we're focused on, and I think GEO will be a part of that.
Excellent. I just want to before we get to the final set of questions, just a very quick question on markets. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about the government and the IoT D2D market as well. Where predominantly do you see the growth for Viasat over the next 2 or 3 years? Which of these markets do you think is the one that you really need to perform in, and that's the one that's going to really propel the company in the next 2 or 3 years?
I think kind of the way we don't think of it as discrete markets. For instance, let's just take the D2D market. Okay, I think certainly one of the really big applications there is mobile phones, right? Wearables and your cell phones. That's one. But another really interesting market there is going to be autonomous vehicles of all types. So that would be autonomous cars, delivery drones, robotaxis and aeronautical robotaxis, and then certainly from a national security perspective, autonomous vehicles, air drones are a really big market. So think of it as you've got a couple of different things you're trying to get to with those. One is, for a lot of them, you need high-speed communications because you're trying to get imagery out of them, as an example, right? Or you may need to send complicated instructions to them. So broadband's important. When you can do that at broadband, Ka band or Ku band, airtime costs are really low. Like, it could be less than $1 a gigabyte. Think about that. You can get speeds of 100 megabits a second because you've got gigahertz of spectrum to work with. But those antennas are pretty big. For others, if you only need 1 megabit a second and you're not going to send gigabytes to them, you'd like to use a really small antenna, like a shark fin that's on a car, right? So that you're going to do with mobile satellite frequencies. And think of it as a continuum. depending on what the platform is, what its mission, you might have some need for small antennas if they're expendable or disposable, larger antennas if there's passengers in them. So we think if you're going to do it market facing, you're going to want to have this combination of broadband and mobile satellite services bands to serve that market. And we're one of the very few companies that has that combination of spectrum in both of those bands, as well as the technology development to do both the space and ground part. So we're looking at it more holistically than just as one or the other.
Fantastic. We could talk for a lot longer on all of these topics, but we have to get to our second set of second set of personal questions now to end the conversation. So some interesting ones here. So this is a fun one, and I know you're a music fan, so I thought this one would be good for you. So at our satellite show, you've been volunteered to open a special karaoke evening. What song are you choosing to sing?
Okay, so I looked into this a little bit. The one I would choose, it's an oldie but goodie, is Tequila by the Champs. I don't know if you know that song, but in order to sing it, all you really have to do is be able to yell tequila 3 times during the course of the song. And even I can do that.
Okay, that's not the song I expected to hear. I was maybe expecting the Springsteen one, but I will look that song up. What is your main interest outside of working in the space industry?
Right now, I'd say it's my family. I think I've got kids, grandkids, grandnephews, and nieces. It's really, really fun. And as much as I can, I like to do stuff with them.
Fantastic. What would you say your favorite dish is when traveling? It can be a starter, main, or a dessert.
Well, anybody that's traveled with me probably knows the real answer, which is gelato or ice cream. If I can find a gelato shop, that's what it would be. Otherwise, it's ice cream.
Do you have a favorite flavor?
Yeah, generally anything coffee related. Coffee, espresso with dark chocolate. That's hard to beat.
Very nice, very nice. One thing that has surprised you in the industry over the last 10 years?
I thought about this. So space, satellites, is a very capital intensive industry. And what has been amazing to me is the changes in capital formation over that time period. That the amounts of money that can be assembled, and also some of the value propositions that people are investing in are pretty surprising. Like to me, like Bitcoin is very, very surprising. What is it that attracts so much capital there, other than just the notion that for some reason it's going to go up, right? So we're seeing some really, to me, I've been in the industry for a long time, some very surprising things about capital formation and the impact that has on entire industries. And I didn't expect that.
That's a super interesting. I'd love to delve into that more, but we don't have much time. End question. We want to get sort of either a movie recommendation, a TV box set recommendation, or a book recommendation. Something that you've enjoyed and something you can share with our audience.
Yeah. So, well, this is going to show some of the nerdy part of me and the business part, but one of the books I really liked a lot, I thought was super illuminating, is The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen, which explains it's about dimensions of value. A lot of it's really about the role of market forces in different businesses and how those market forces change and how companies tend to respond to those. And I've found it to be really enlightening and very thought-provoking. So it's not so much, and actually I spend a lot of my time thinking about this stuff. So to me, this counts as sort of a combination of work and fun activity, just thinking about those things.
No, fantastic. Well, Mark, it's a pleasure as always, and very interesting set of answers to some of those questions. Not what I was expecting, which was a good thing. We look forward to obviously seeing you at Satellite. It's going to be great moderating you again on the opening general session at Satellite, and it's always a pleasure. One of the legendary figures of our industry, so it's always great to catch up with you. Wish you and the team at Viasat a very successful 2026, and look forward to seeing all the progress you make. And it's a real pleasure to catch up with you, and we wish you all the best for the year.
Thanks, Mark. Same to you and your team. Take care.
Thank you.